Namaskar, my name is Nilesh Oak, and greetings to all of you who are attending and participating in this River Saraswati International Conference. My thanks to Professor Chowdhury for inviting me to present my work about River Saraswati and its interconnectedness with Indian Itihasa in this conference. So let's begin. I will share my screen and I want to present a glimpse of how River Saraswati is very closely connected with the Indian Itihasa, and in turn, how Indian Itihasa, the evidence from Indian Itihasa, and frankly, let me not limit myself to Indian Itihasa, but from all ancient Indian narratives, how they are connected with River Saraswati. So let's begin. How we can tell a brief story of River Saraswati and in the process tell the story of Indian civilization. Now today Saraswati does not exist. River Saraswati is simply not there. Granted, we can find the path of it, and there are many attempts to rejuvenate the old glory of Saraswati, but it has disappeared to us. To the extent it is still in our memory and we try to recover it. For example, when people in their Shraddha discuss the presence of River Saraswati along with River Yamuna and Ganga at Prayagraj, it is one such attempt to preserve the memory of this glorious ancient river, which is closely tied to our Sanatana Dharma, closely tied to Indian civilization. So what happened? Well, before what happened, let's talk about what evidence is telling us. What we have evidence today, great work of James Blinkhorn, that River Saraswati, now we know, definitely existed for the last 200,000 years. Specifically, we have evidence of it existing 172,000 years ago, flowing near Bikaner. Now, some geological phenomenon happened. I'm talking of sometime around 70,000 years ago, possibly related to Toba explosion. We do not know that for sure. But what we do know is that the geological changes were such that its path changed from the southwestern direction or further southwest part of India went further northwest part of India, as I'm showing with the arrows. So essentially, as if it moved from Bikaner area to what we know modern day as Kalibanga area. The descriptions of Rigveda that we see, the grandest of the grand river, Ambitame, Naditame, Devitame, Saraswati, or the river that is flowing fast like horses, or a river that cuts the tops of the mountains as easy as somebody cutting the stem of a lotus flower, or the river Giribhya Samudra, starting in high mountains, flowing all the way to the sea. These are the times 200,000 years ago, 70,000 years ago. And even when the path has changed, it is still a grand river. This is that paper I refer to, James Blinkhorn and others, where we have evidence of River Saraswati flowing near Bikaner, going back to 200,000 years. Now, you can read the paper for the details. But the question is this something that they found out the first time? Well, no. Actually, if you go back some 50 plus years ago, some of the great geologists like Dr. Ghosh, who have done great research and actually created the maps. And you can see these maps. For example, if you have to look for the shift of River Saraswati, the Bikaner may not be the starting point. Actually, the river might have flown. I said might, because we need to wait for additional evidence, but might have flown as further south as Jaipur and Ajmer, somewhere in that area. Okay, so this is from 69, like 50-year-old research. So if we have to speculate, where was River Saraswati before 172,000 years ago? Very likely into the area where I'm showing with the arrow. And we don't know what possibly caused the shift, but it shifted northward, very likely that geological shift of Indian subcontinent coming into the Himalayas. And it shifted to Bikaner, okay? Then from 172,000 years to about 70,000 years, it's there following that old path. And then afterwards, we see that shift to Kalibanga, okay? Around 70,000 years ago. What happens after that? Now, this could have happened because of various morphodynamics changes into the Indian rivers, Indian plates, geological changes, plate tectonics, so many factors. That's not the subject today. Now, from 70,000 to 50,000 years ago, essentially, this is the Grand River. So when Rigveda describes this river, it could be anywhere from 200,000 years ago or even before to definitely up to 50,000 years. Okay. Now, something interesting happened around between 50,000 years and 40,000 years ago. What was that? Yamuna separated from Saraswati and started meeting Ganga. Why is this important? It's important for us to understand our Itihasa very well. Okay, for example, Ramayana describes Yamuna and Ganga meeting together, and geological evidence is telling us this happened sometime after 50,000 years ago, which means what? The Ramayana happened in the last 50,000 years ago and not before that. Okay, if you go further, so say now fast forward from 40,000 plus years to 22,000 BC. Now, what's the significance of 22,000 BC? It is the peak of the glacial maximum, known as the last glacial maximum. The river waters went down. They did not dry up. There's a lot of misinformation out there, as if like India was covered with the snow. Nonsense. There was no such thing. Actually, India is a habitable land for million plus years. Okay, but certainly the temperatures cooled down, the river waters coming from the glaciers went down. And so, yes, that's very important. In fact, this could be the end of the descriptions of Saraswati that you see in the Rigveda. Fast forward to 13,000 BC, about 15,000 years ago, and river Shatudri, Satluj, also left Saraswati and started flowing sharply in the west direction. In the Valmiki Ramayana, we have evidence of Shatudri flowing in the west direction. And what does that tell you? That means Ramayana happens sometime after 13,000 BC. And lo and behold, if you go to Valmiki Ramayana, look at 600 plus specific astronomy references, it pinpoints to a very specific year like 12,209 BCE for the Ram Ravan Yuddha. And you can actually date very specific events of Ramayana from 12,240 BCE, the birth year of Bhagwan Rama, to 12,196 BCE, when Valmiki composed Ramayana and taught it to Lava and Kusha, okay, sons of Bhagwan Rama. Fast forward, now we have a younger dryas period, okay, the temperature plunged down, a lot of things happen. This period is noted down in the Indian narratives through astronomy known as Rohini Shakata Bheda, but that's not the topic today. Fast forward to Mahabharata times, between 7,500 BC to 4,500 BCE. Saraswati has dried down practically, or, became smaller in its scope from 20,000 years ago, from the last glacial maximum, not least. But now there is a rejuvenation of it through intensification of monsoon. There is a phenomenal data of Professor Anindya Sarkar, okay, and you can see very consistent data from Arabian Sea to the land-based research showing us that there was an intensification of monsoon between this time, which is where actually the Mahabharata war falls off. And Mahabharata text has close to 200, more than 100, close to 200 plus descriptions of river Saraswati, and they beautifully match with this 5561 BCE, that is the year of Mahabharata war. So river Saraswati is telling us the story, help us tell the story of Indian civilization. And the descriptions of river Saraswati in the ancient text, in turn, help us understand the evolution, devolution, ups and downs, the morphodynamics changes that are happening to river Saraswati. So if you have to form a timeline for our chronology, we can say Mahabharata war more than 7,000 years ago, Ramayana more than 14,000 years ago, and definitely some portions of Rigveda more than 21,000 years ago. You can Remember, this is a multiplication of 7,000. Mahabharata 7,000 years ago, Ramayana 14,000 years ago, and some portions of Rigveda more than 21,000 years ago. In fact, that deduction of some portions of Rigveda more than 21,000 years ago, yes, there is additional evidence, but a decisive decision for that comes from the morphodynamics of River Saraswati and the rich geological data that we have for River Saraswati going back to 200,000 plus years. Okay. Now, fast forward post Mahabharata after 4500 BCE, quickly, a lot of other things happen: geological patterns, climatological patterns, oceanography patterns, but essentially, River Saraswati quickly dried up. And you can see this. I have not shown all the data just to limit my time, but you can actually see this evidence into a paper of Singh and Gupta, that was in Nature Communication 2017. So not only you see Shatudri turning sharp west in 13,000 BCE, but if you look at the data in Kalibanga, okay, the width of the river, okay, last 70,000 years, getting smaller and smaller during the Mahabharata times, and further smaller by 4500 BCE, and then eventually drying up, just the Ghaggar Hakra small channel remains. So I'm just showing this here symbolically by saying this river Saraswati is no more, but Yamuna still exists, Shatudri still exists. All right. So quickly, if I have to summarize our conclusions here, we know the story of river Saraswati because of the detailed descriptions of the river from ancient Indian narratives, be it Rigveda, be it Ramayana, be it Mahabharata. Okay. And of course, the other texts like Brahmana Grantha and Puranas and so on. In turn, we can corroborate the specific timelines, the epochs of our ancient event, for example, like Ramayana or Mahabharata, or recasting, re-editing of the Vedas by Vyasa. And for that, I would encourage all of you to read Nadi Sukta from Rigveda 10.75. That great river Saraswati, Nadi Tame, Ambi Tame, Devi Tame, Saraswati, right in the Rigveda recasting, at least by the way it is picked up by Vyasadeva, you can see that transition from a grand Saraswati to grand Sindhu. This is a point lost on many. Okay, so when many people think of Nadi Saraswati or Nadi Sukta, they are interested in the sequence of the rivers from the east to the west, and that is true, and that's great. There is a mention of Saraswati that is also important to many, but we cannot forget the fact that Nadi Sukta also points to a change of status of a grand Saraswati now changing over, passing the baton to grand Sindhu. And why is that? Because Satluj has stopped feeding its water to river Saraswati, and beginning 13,000 BC, so for the last 15,000 years, it is feeding its waters to Sindhu. So, okay, so that transition is been captured by Vyasadeva 7,500 years ago at the time of Mahabharata war, and that you see in the Nadi Sukta. And the above two, as you can see, the corollary to each other, okay, the above two are further validated. Again, I'm not going to go into it because of the limitations of time, but these conclusions are further validated by empirical and scientific multidisciplinary evidence. You just name the field of science. If the evidence exists for appropriate epochs, and you can connect the dots, they beautifully corroborate what we know from our ancient Indian narratives, what we know about river Saraswati from the geological, hydrology data, and so on. So what are some of these disciplines? Geology, geophysics, climatology, oceanography, sedimentology, genetics, physical anthropology, paleontology, and so on. I would encourage all of you who are interested in knowing further about this multidisciplinary evidence to read my books and watch my YouTube talks. Again, greetings to all. Thank you to Professor Chaudhary. And I wish you all well. Have a great intellectual sessions, conversations throughout the day as you enjoy your time at the conference. Namaskar and thank you.